Russia's president has laid out a stark ultimatum. The war in Ukraine will end only if Ukrainian forces withdraw from areas Moscow claims. Otherwise, Moscow will achieve its aims by force. In remarks delivered during a visit to a Central Asian forum, he framed this demand as a precondition for peace, while also opening the door to future negotiations based on the latest US-Ukraine draft agreements. He said, when Ukrainian forces leave the territories they hold, then the fighting stops. If they don't, we will achieve this goal by military means. That's it. The statement was not cloaked in diplomatic nuance. It was a blunt warning that Moscow regards as non-negotiable. At the same time, the Russian leader acknowledged that the draft peace proposals currently being shaped in Geneva, the result of talks between the United States and Ukraine, might serve as a foundation for future agreements. In general, we agreed that this can be the basis for future agreements, he said, adding that the version of the plan discussed in Geneva had already been handed to Moscow. He indicated that while the United States has taken into account our position, further discussions are needed to hammer out concrete terms. Some topics are crucial. The US side takes into account our position. It is clear that we need to sit down and discuss some concrete issues. Everything should be expressed in diplomatic language, he said. Beyond those conditions, he also said that if European leaders sought guarantees, Russia would be willing to pledge not to attack Europe. However, he simultaneously questioned the legitimacy of Ukraine's political leadership and declared it legally impossible to sign a binding deal directly with the Kyiv government. According to him, any peace agreement must be recognized by the broader international community and must formalize Russian territorial gains. As of November 2025, independent estimates concur that Russia controls roughly 1/5 of Ukraine's land. That includes all of Crimea, annexed in 2014, and large parts of the eastern and southern oblasts. The issue of occupied territory remains the single largest sticking point in any potential peace deal, and according to the Russian president, until Ukraine withdraws and Russia's gains are internationally recognized, war will continue. Russia's narrative on the war's progress is one of near inevitability. In his address, the Russian leader repeated the claim that Russian forces have encircled Ukrainian defenders in the eastern city of Pokrovsk and nearby Myrnohrad in the Donetsk region. He argued that this shows the Ukrainian army is on the verge of collapse and that the offensive is practically impossible to hold back. Observers, however, treat these claims with caution. Ukrainian officials reject the idea that the defenders are encircled, insisting Ukrainian troops still hold a corridor to avoid total surrender and continue to resist along frontline positions. Independent conflict monitors confirm that while Russia has made incremental territorial gains in recent months, including in the Donetsk, Zaporizhzhia, and parts of Dnipropetrovsk regions, many contested areas remain fiercely contested. The broader context of the war and peace negotiations has also evolved in recent months. A leaked 28-point peace proposal, reportedly drafted by the United States, sparked alarm in Kyiv and across European capitals. Under its terms, significant concessions to Russia, including territorial recognition and limitations on Ukraine's capacity to rearm, were seen as looming. In response, US and Ukrainian negotiators redrafted the plan in Geneva. The revised version attempts to strike a balance. It recognizes the need to address security concerns, but avoids binding Ukraine to excessive territorial concessions or a permanent ban on NATO membership. Still, Russia, per its president, has not budged from core demands. The Kremlin insists on full Ukrainian withdrawal from occupied zones, international recognition of Russian control over seized territories, and a guarantee that Ukraine will never join NATO or host Western troops. To compound matters, Russian authorities have moved to cement control over annexed Ukrainian regions through social and political policies. On November 26th, the Kremlin signed a decree aimed at forcing a cultural transformation in those areas, mandating that by 2036, a specified percentage of residents adopt Russian civic identity and language. In effect, Moscow is not only seeking a diplomatic settlement, but also institutionalizing the changes on the ground, making reversal increasingly difficult. For Ukraine, these developments amount to a grim reality. International pressure is mounting, and Western partners are calling for negotiated settlements, yet the core terms being floated by Russia would likely amount to permanent territorial losses and a diminished sovereignty for Kyiv. President Volodymyr Zelensky and Ukrainian officials have repeatedly warned they will not accept any deal that involves ceding territory or compromising their right to join collective defence structures like NATO. Multiple statements have stressed that peace cannot come at the expense of national integrity, a shift that reflects both public sentiment in Ukraine and long-standing constitutional principles. Meanwhile, despite Russia's heavy human and material cost in sustaining the war, compounded by Western sanctions, experts believe the Kremlin remains committed for the long haul. Structural adaptations, sustained energy revenues, and strategic partnerships have allowed Moscow to absorb economic strain while maintaining military pressure. The Russian president has restated his conditions clearly: withdrawal by Ukraine, international recognition of Russian gains, and security guarantees for Russia's borders, with the warning that anything less will be met with continued fighting. While Moscow expresses a readiness to base future deals on US-Ukraine peace proposals, its core demands remain non-negotiable. Whether this brinkmanship leads to a genuine ceasefire or simply prolongs conflict depends increasingly on external actors: the United States, European capitals, and Kyiv's unwillingness to trade territory for peace. For now, the war shows no sign of ending. In the end, the path forward remains deeply uncertain. Russia continues to assert that battlefield realities favor its position, while Ukraine insists that any settlement must preserve its sovereignty and territorial integrity. The United States and Europe are navigating a delicate balance between pursuing diplomacy and maintaining support for Kyiv, even as war fatigue grows across multiple capitals. What is clear is that every new statement, every proposed draft, and every shift along the front line reshapes the diplomatic landscape. Until all sides find common ground that addresses their core security concerns, the possibility of a lasting ceasefire will remain elusive, and the war's human and strategic costs will continue to rise.